Go. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Gentile. I am a strategic investor and second largest shareholder of the company behind Glencore in Group 11 Resources, ZNG, on the TSX Venture Exchange. I'm here today with Bart Jaworski, who is the CEO and co-founder of Group 11 Resources. We're here today to talk about the press release that came out this morning, talking about probably the most important and significant hole that Group 11 has ever drilled in the history of the company in Ireland. Most investors will look at the headline number and wonder why we're doing cartwheels here with excitement on this hole. The grade is not headline grade, but very, very important geologically. Major discovery, major geological improvement of the understanding of the model today with the intersection of a major fault, which many companies have been looking for years in this part of Ireland to try to understand the geology. And we think we've unlocked a major key structural geological component to this whole basin with this discovery hole today. And so I've invited Bart on here because of the importance of this hole, because of the nuance and the need to better understand geologically for investors why this hole is so important. I've invited Bart to do this short video to walk our investors through the importance of this hole, the geological context, and more importantly, the plans for the future and what this could mean for the company. So Bart, welcome, and please feel free to share your views with investors and our shareholders today.
Thanks very much, Michael. Thanks for inviting me on. That's great to be here. So yeah, my name is Bart Jaworski. As Michael said, co-founder and CEO of the company. I'm a geologist and ex-mining analyst with about 25 years experience in the industry, and Group 11 is focused on finding big zinc deposits in Ireland. So just to give you a bit of context on today's news, about 2 years ago, we started hitting really interesting drill holes in the Limerick Basin in a prospect called Carrickittle, which is an old prospect. We turned the rigs around from the old timers and we started hitting some brand new massive sulfide zones, a la this hole here, 10 meters at 20%, for example, with 55% intervals within, very strong grades, 100 grams silver. We followed that up about 6 months later with another interval, 7.5 meters at 30%, 50 meters away. This was in December of 2020. Again, 55% intervals in here, very strong, 160 grams silvers. This time copper seeping in, very, very interesting indeed. 400 meters away then, a few more months later of drilling, and we found more massive sulfide, this time over narrower intervals, but still up to 32% zinc and lead. So nothing to scoff at, certainly some very interesting results. That was, again, in a place called Carrickittle, which is right here, if you can see my yellow flashing lines here, right in the middle of this 25-kilometer long Palace-Green corridor, which essentially starts off with Glencore's Palace-Green deposit on the very north end, which is one of the largest undeveloped zinc deposits in the world. It's 45 million tons of 8% zinc and lead. The whole area here, by the way, is the Limerick Basin. It's in southwest Ireland. Everything here in blue that you see is Glencore's ground. Everything in yellow is South 32's ground. The area we're talking about today is the Stone Park joint venture, which is in the brown outline between ourselves and Arkle Resources on the AIM. And the 100% owned ground by Group 11 is everything in red. We own 76%, by the way, of the joint venture. So getting back to the rocks, right beside Palace Green, we have our own deposit, Stone Park, which is 5 million tons of 11%, higher grade than Glencore's, albeit smaller. And if you notice, those two deposits are situated on the northern side of the circular volcanic feature of the Limerick Volcanic Complex. This is a very large, 20 kilometers across, 10 kilometers north-south. So it's a very large structure. So the big idea that's been really gaining traction over the last 2 years is that we have the hypothesized mirror image of Glencore's Palace Green deposit on the southern side of the Limerick Volcanic Complex. So that's a really big target and a 50 to 100 million ton type of target. And we think Carrickittle, the photos I showed you, are the shallow possible extensions of that target. And 10 kilometers downtrend, we have Ballywire, which we talked about earlier this year. We just hit some brand new massive sulfides there as well, 3 meters at 12%. Then we have Stone Park resource itself, which remains open. And then we have a number of regional earlier stage targets as well as copper targets. But just to get back to the main target of what's underneath the volcanics, this is a cross section looking at it regionally. We know we have Palace Green, Stone Park on one side. We know we have Carrickittle on the other side. And really what we're looking for is what's down deep. We're looking for the roots of the system. And this whole thesis is predicated on the fact that the idea rather that there's major faults on the south side of the basin, because we know that there's no major faults on the north side of this volcanic complex. And we know the zinc must have come from somewhere. And in Ireland, zinc comes from big faults with large displacements. So the idea is, where are these faults? They haven't been discovered yet. So our idea was predicated that the south side, we have some geological clues as to why that is, but the south side is where we think the big faults are. So that gets us to today's news. The 3 holes that we drilled are here in the flashing yellow, and the southern holes are the most important ones that we just put out this morning, because they're the first foray into the southern part of the complex. The northern part has been very well explored historically, but the southern half has been completely untouched. So I'm just going to get into that in a second. By the way, as an aside, the 3 holes that we're about to drill are here as well, so just for future reference. But just getting back to the zone that we just identified with drilling, what's emerging is that the south side has broad zones of very intense brecciation and pyrite mineralization. Why that's interesting is that all of a sudden it's starting to look a lot like what's happening on the northern half with these breccia bodies that are associated with the Palace Green deposit. We already have zinc mineralization here in high grades with paracittal, and now we're starting to see that there's massive breccia bodies over 5 kilometers by 2 kilometers, say. And additionally, on top of that, we just found a large displacement fault finally in this hole here at Caracittal West. And that directly points to a very specific area as a major zinc target. So I'm just going to get into that. Just going to show you the cross section for that right here. And this is what it looked like before we drilled. So we were expecting to see a minor fault over here with a bit of displacement, and we're hoping to see, we're going to be drilling this hole here. And instead what we found is this, which is a very large fault indeed, at least 150 meters, if not more, like 200, 300, or maybe even 400 meter displacement. We're just basically going on the top of the wall sorption, which may have 200 meters of wall sorption that's been eroded off. So we don't quite know exactly how much of a displacement, but it is at least 150 meters. We, number one, have wall sorption. That was a big question mark. Is the wall sorption going to continue down? Yes. Is there brecciation? Definitely. There's a lot of displaced or dissolution breccia here in the gray. There's a major fault, which is really great news. And the icing on the cake is that we found visible sphalerite along 13 meters in the hanging wall of that major fault structure, as well as some zinc as well in the footwall in the base of the wall sorption unit. So that is very tantalizing. And the reason that is that zinc is very pale, and it occurs in late stage veins, which means it's been remobilized. Ergo, meaning that it's been probably moved from down below, from the source area. And so that's really where the excitement begins, because all we have to do now is trace this fault to where it meets the base of the wall sorption limestone. And that is the intersection of those 2 planes is our fault structure. So all of a sudden it's getting geometrically a lot more simple to follow and hone in on the target now that we've clipped and pierced this major fault structure. So that's the big target for us, and that's new. And also what's interesting is that there's a copper target directly underneath it, because by the time you get down to here, you're getting into the sandstones. Sandstones are known to be very prospective for copper silver in this camp. So to bring it all together now, looking at it in bird's eye view, the big zinc target is located here in the red. The hole that we drilled that we're just looking at in the cross section is here. The major fault structure that we identified is here. And the photos that I showed at the top of the deck are located here. So paracittal zones 1 to 4, this is how they sort of fit into the puzzle, is that we know that they're pointing in a northwest direction. And there seems to be a trend here of mineralization. Notice that the other hole that we drilled just now in today's news release here did hit everything except for the zinc. So it looks like maybe we're just on the margins of the system there. But indeed, we got a lot of massive pyrite, a lot of brecciation in the wall sorption, but maybe we're just off the fairway a little bit, whereas this appears to be more on the fairway. So this is what it comes down to. So it's a very interesting target, certainly warrants immediate follow-up. That's something yet to be worked out internally here, but it looks like a very exciting target that we definitely want to get to in the not too distant future.
Hey, Bart, if I could just cut you off for a second there. You mind going back a few slides where you had the Palace Green resource on that cross section there? You showed a few slides back. I guess for me, what got me really excited, this slide here. Can you just explain again, the geological understanding of how Palace Green was formed and how this fault could be telling in terms of how the mineralization and the resource of Palace Green was placed there, and why this fault could indicate that we could be sitting on the core or the really juicier, higher grade part of the system because of this discovery of the fault today. Because Palace Green already, for viewers who don't know, is one of the largest undeveloped zinc deposits in the world. 45 million tons at 8% zinc is nothing to sneeze at. But what really got my attention as you walked me through this release today, Bart, was that we could be sitting on something even juicier or more robust, that the PAL screen could be a distal kind of displacement of the core system, and we could be zeroing in on that core. So that's why that hole to me is really the most exciting hole we're going to drill in the history of the company.
Yeah, exactly. So we know that zinc deposits in Ireland formed when the fault hits the base of the wall-sortion limestone. So we're looking for that fault. We have the zinc. We don't actually know where it came from at Powell's Green Stone Park. And the exploration efforts have been to try to find out where the feeder fault is, and we still haven't found it. So the idea is always, for the last couple of years, that's been gaining traction, is that perhaps it's on the south side. And we have, again, like I mentioned, a number of reasons why we believe that. We know that there's faults further away that should be cutting through this area, but we haven't actually been able to prove that yet. And if our theory holds, mineralizing fluids back in the day would have been coming up here and forming a large zinc deposit, but then flowing outwards distally further and further away to maybe a lower temperature environment and dropping out your zinc and lead, but not the copper and not the silver, because the temperatures may have been cooler, as an example. And we don't see copper and silver in this in the Powell's Green Stone Park area. Whereas we certainly see it at Carrickittle, as the pictures I showed you certainly had strong silvers up to 160 grams per ton. We had copper up to 0.23% copper. So perhaps that indicates that we're closer to the source. And again, now hitting this fault definitely suggests that perhaps we're getting close to the feeder structure, if not the feeder structure itself.
Fantastic. And I want to reiterate for our viewers, this is not some geological theory that we just baked together after the discovery of this drill hole. This has been a theory that you've had, Bart, as a co-founder of the company, for years and years. This is
years,
the geological model that you have put together. And so that's why the geologists, I think, at Group 11 are really, really excited here, because this drill hole has proven that their geological theory actually is real. And the last step, like you said, Bart, now is just to trace this fault down dip, where that contact point would be, particularly mineralization would be found. And we've got a very good chance, I think, at least in my opinion, I'm just an investor, but in my opinion, of finding something quite significant here. And also from an investor perspective, de-risk this target, because now we know exactly where to drill and how to pinpoint the proposed system mineralization that should be present at depth here.
Exactly. It's all about pinpointing and vectoring in. So now we're vectored in and pinpointed exactly within a few hundred meters of where this thing should be.
Fantastic. Well, Bart, I want to switch gears again, but I mean, this is a fantastic target, really exciting, kind of game-changing, kind of tier 1 size target. So we're obviously really excited as an investor and the company to be drilling this as soon as we can. But we can also talk about the other activity the company's going through. Now we made a major copper discovery recently at Tulacondra. We've got some pretty exciting holes going down at Ballywire. This is a big, corridor, as you mentioned earlier, 25-kilometer corridor. So maybe just take a couple of minutes just to give investors a few updates on the other targets and the progress we're making on the other targets away from this large zinc target at close to Prowse.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned we have a copper target underneath this large fault that we announced today. So that's quite interesting. And I just wanted to touch on the copper aspect of it. We do have 3 copper historic resources in and around trucking distance, if you will, in this area. One of them we just recently drilled, and that's Tulacondra. The other ones are Gorchum, which was actually mined in the 60s and 70s as an open pit, and Denison, which is another historic resource. But just on Tulacondra, this is where the historic resource is. It's about 3.5 million tons of 0.7 copper and about 28 grams silver. And sitting right on top of it is the zinc prospective mineral lithologies, which is the wall-sortion limestone. So you have zinc potential on top, and you have a copper historic resource in the roots of the system. So it's quite interesting. You have both commodities there to play for. But just focusing on the copper for the minute, the zone is about 600 meters east-west and about 100 meters to 200 meters, say, north-south. There's some really stellar intercepts within this. And the area that we wanted to test initially, because all the historic core is physically gone, we wanted to actually, there's nothing to study except for the old core logs. So we drilled a hole in this section here. This is what it looked like before we drilled it. We drilled it 50 meters away from the other historic collars. And we knew that there was 60 meters of copper silver here and snippets here. So we drilled this hole just to see whether we can find a bit more copper. And we were pleasantly surprised. We got 130 meters of 0.5 copper and 21 grams silver through this. And what's more, we got a nice bonus area in here that we didn't know existed before, which is 13 meters of 0.4 copper and 16 grams silver. But within it, the highest copper kick ever registered on the property, which is 5.4% copper over 40 centimeters. And we're getting up to 640 grams silver higher up in the system. So there's certainly some really strong mineralization within it and over large distances. So it's at surface. This is the type of thing I think we have potential to find underneath this new fault that we found today. because certainly it's in the ORS, which is called the old red sandstone. It's a very prolific unit within Ireland underneath the limestones. And so when you meet this fault, you have potential like this. So I think it's very, very interesting from that perspective. And you mentioned what other catalysts might be coming down the pike for us here. So in 2022, just to summarize, we have 2 rigs going. We have over 6,000 meters planned for this year. We've just announced 1,800 or so meters of that at Stone Park this morning. And so we have another 400 meters to go in 3 drill holes that'll be starting up in 2 months or so. But in the interim, we're working right now on following up the Ballywire hit that we announced a few months ago, the 3 meters of 12%. So stay tuned for those. And then we're going to follow it up with Carrickittle drilling. And then there's a number of other regional high priority targets that we're also drilling. So it should be quite an active year.
Fantastic. Well, Bart, thanks for taking the time to illustrate the importance of news. Like I said, all drill holes are not created equal. I think this drill hole, intersecting this fault, is the most important hole the company's ever drilled in its history. I think the follow-up drilling will be the most important holes drilled and probably the most compelling target we've had in the history of the company. So obviously we're really excited of what's to come. The company's fully funded to do some more drilling and have the funds to go after these targets aggressively. And I'd encourage all you investors that are geologically inclined to reach out to Bart if you want some more color and some more information on the importance of these holes and the targets that we're looking at for the company. But clearly a very exciting time to be invested in Group 11 and a very exciting time for the company where the model is coming together in a really nice way for our investors. So thank you everyone for your attention and look forward to speaking to you all in the future.